President Trump has decided to normalize relations with Russia. That's what resulted from the meeting in Riyadh. God bless him. It's about time. It's long overdue. That's the key point. We are not going to settle the Ukraine matter quickly. That's going to take time. We are not going to build in isolation some new security architecture for Europe. That's going to have to involve the Europeans, the Russians, and the Americans. But he set us on the right path. The problem in the United States and the West in general is that there is little patience. I think people expected, this meeting would end and the sky would open up and the sun would shine and we'd all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. And I have a feeling that some people will express disappointment. But the truth is, President Trump, as we know, and this was true back in 2017, 18, 19, and 20, wanted a normalization of relations with Russia. He was impeded, obstructed by the Washington community that saw a benefit to themselves financially and politically to push war with Russia. That has all failed. And that's about time that we turn things around. Thank God President Trump is doing that. On the other hand, the ultimate outcome of all of this is not going to quite be what we would like necessarily, or even the Europeans. And that's simply because the facts on the ground with the Russians will determine what the outcome looks like. The other thing is that eventually people are going to attack Trump because of NATO and EU saying that he caused their dissolution. No, he didn't. If anything, I think you've got to argue that the dissolution of the EU has been in progress for some time. The Europeans themselves are miserable. They don't like it. They want to govern themselves. They don't want to be governed from Brussels. And economically, it's been a catastrophe. And as far as NATO is concerned, that thing is dead man walking and has been for a long time. As you and I both know, it was dead man walking when I was there in 97, 98, and 99 in Europe. It takes a long time for these things sometimes to expire. None of that is Donald Trump's fault. But he's taking the right steps that are good for us and ultimately, I argue, will be very good for Europe. But they won't be good for Europe until they get rid of the people that are ruling them right now, and they will be gone soon.
And you talk about some of the impediments to this, and even the title of our show today is Zelensky is obstructing peace and actually getting in the way of some of this. This is him on U.S. television trying to make the case that he deserves to be on the table.
Have you been given any assurances that Ukraine will have an equal seat at the negotiating table?
So I will never accept any decisions between the United States and Russia about Ukraine. Never. And our people, never. And our adults and children and everybody. It can't be so. This is the war in Ukraine against us, and it's our human losses. And we are thankful for all the support, unity between USA, in USA, around Ukraine support, bipartisan unity, bipartisan support. We are thankful for all of this, but there is no any leader in the world who can really make a deal with Putin without us, about us.
So he said, I will not permit it. Does he have the power to permit or not permit anything here?
No. Again, he is a sort of King Lear raging against the storm in Shakespeare's famous play. He's irrelevant. He has no influence at all. And I think he stands an excellent chance of ending up like Mussolini or any number of authoritarian dictators like him that have violated people's rights and led their country to disaster. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it. I'd be more concerned about President Trump's safety because, you've got a lot of Ukrainians, especially the Ukrainian SBU, the security forces, they're operating in certainly in Northern Virginia. I worry about that. That's a real danger, and I hope that we'll crack down on that because the CIA, as you know, has played a big role in the big lie, in spinning the false narratives and pushing this disastrous war. So I think Mr. Ratcliffe should get some marching orders from Donald Trump to clean that nest out, because if you don't, they'll continue to subvert and undermine what we're trying to do, which again is normalization with Russia. That's number one. Once that is accomplished, and it's going to take some time, but it will work, the rest of these things will fall into place. And our friend Zelensky is not going to be around. He'll be gone somewhere else, trying to live on his ill-gotten gains. I imagine Elon Musk would have a field day tracking down, doing some forensic accounting and finding all the billions of dollars he and his friends have stolen from us.
Well, and in fact, that apparently is going on right now. I don't know whether it's Elon, but certainly from the U.S., where the Treasury Secretary went to Kiev, and from what I'm reading on some of the Ukrainian Telegram channels, that they're scared to death that part of the deal was we're going to do some audits to find out where this stuff went, and if the stuff comes to light about any malfeasance that may or may not have happened, it could be really problematic for the Ukrainian leader. Now, also at that same conference where Rubio was this morning, he was asked the issue about, will Zelensky be at the table? Does he deserve to be there? At the moment, he said, well, he's not really sidelining anybody, but...
No one is being sidelined here, but President Trump is in a position that he campaigned on to initiate a process that could bring about an end to this conflict. And from that could emerge some very positive things for the United States, for Europe, for Ukraine, for the world. But first it begins by the end of this conflict. And so the only thing President Trump's trying to do is bring about peace.
So I think see, they said, yeah, we're not sidelining anybody, but we're sidelining him because we're worried about the United States, Europe, and even Russia moving forward, because those are the things that are going to matter. So how do you think, and I'm asking you, I guess, to speculate here, but how do you think that the U.S. is going to not sideline, but sideline Zelensky as these things go to whatever the next level is?
Well, before we move on, the third person that was sitting in that picture is Mr. Witkoff, who is another Wall Streeter and a very wealthy man, but a close confidant of Trump. And I must say, my impression is that most of what's positive that's happening right now in U.S. foreign policy, at any rate, is really a product of Mr. Witkoff. He has Trump's ear. Trump trusts him. And I'm sorry he didn't speak, but that's understandable given the circumstances. But I think he's exerting a very positive influence. I hope he can do that in the Middle East, because I think the Middle East is still an entirely different set of circumstances. It's, as you and I used to say, it's a barrel of eels. And I don't know that Mr. Witkoff can sort that one out, but he's done great work. So I think that's good news. On the other hand, I think all this business about Zelensky is irrelevant. He's kept alive and kept in power by the CIA and MI6. Remove that element, and I don't think he'll be around long. I don't know where he's going to go if he leaves Ukraine and be safe.
Yeah, that's a real issue. Many of the guests on our show have voiced concerns over his future safety, even maybe before this thing gets to an end. But we'll leave that one there for now. Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier in this show about the consequences and what things that do matter. If Zelensky is an impediment to peace, what is going to matter? And you specifically said the United States is going to act based on realities on the ground. Well, the other actor that's going to base their reactions on the realities on the ground is the Russian side. Now, here is one of the things that Sergei Lavrov said about what is going to animate their view going forward to actually reach a settlement.
Что касается итогов Мюнхенской конференции, могу сказать следующее. Каждый должен отвечать за свои поступки. И когда кто-то долгие годы творит беззаконие, нарушает свои собственные продекларированные когда-то правила равноправия, честной конкуренции, презумпции невиновности, неприкосновенности собственности, свободы выражения мнений, обеспечения свободы доступа к информации, когда все это растаптывается без зазрения совести, когда грабится чужое в нарушении всех норм международного права, когда поощряется нацистский режим, и когда такой нацистский режим накачивается вооружениями для того, чтобы убивать своих собственных граждан, и это все делается в расчете на то, что как-нибудь проскочим и отсидимся под ядерным зонтиком, так уже не будет. И за свои деяния надо отвечать.
Now, he listed a whole lot of things in there about some grievances that they hadn't really. A lot of them were some that you'd mentioned earlier before about, and I'm sure he was referring indirectly to Zelensky in one part because he said, the freedom of religion has been violated, freedom of speech has been violated, international laws, and people have been robbed, i.e. a lot of this money that's being given to Ukraine is going from Russia has been given to Ukraine. But it was also more than that, because he's basically saying that the West up to this point had been culpable in enabling that kind of thing. And he says that's not going to happen anymore. Here's the big question. Is this a negotiation between equals to where Russia is going to have to give something to get something, or do the conditions on the ground make it to where they can just set the conditions?
Of course, neither you nor I were present for this meeting, and we don't know what President Trump says in the Oval Office. But I think President Trump is a realist, and he understands that this is a war that the Russians have won. Their cause was from the beginning just, and they deserve to be reassured about their future security, which means we need a truly neutral Ukraine. I've often talked about the Austrian model, as others have, and I still think that's an excellent model. I think that's possible. It's not going to work with Zelensky or any of his neo-Nazi pals. And, this whole Nazi thing was always a terrible thing to do, because you dredged up old memories. You opened up old wounds. I mean, the Ukrainians suffered terribly under communism, and they hated them. They didn't just wake up in the morning and said, we're going to support the Germans in their crusade against Bolshevism. They and virtually everybody in Eastern Europe swung in that direction because nobody wanted to live under Stalin. Well, that ended. It ended badly for us. It ended badly for them. But that's water under the bridge. That old Stalinist regime is gone, has nothing in common with Russia today. Russia's an entirely different state. And the Russians, unfortunately, had to put up with this and saw how much hatred could be mobilized against them. And they want to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. You can never be 100% certain, but we have to listen to them on that score. They deserve some sort of security guarantee. I think the Austrian solution will provide it. But for the Austrian solution to work there, you have to have the Europeans on side. They've got to sign up for it. I think that's possible the longer we wait. If we try to rush this deal, people like Starmer, who won't be there too much longer, are going to obstruct you because they're globalists. For them, Ukraine's a metaphor for globalism, and anything they do to promote globalism, this destructive force, is justified morally. So they've got to go away. So the longer this takes to ultimately settle matters on the ground, from my standpoint, is fine. And I don't think we should rush it. I think it should be done very deliberately. And then a new security architecture for Europe can emerge. I hope somebody in the Trump administration has hauled out the original proposals that were presented by the Russians in December 2021. We wouldn't even look at them. Biden essentially threw them on the trash heap. We need to pull those out, and that will give us an appreciation for what the Russians wanted then, which from my standpoint was not unreasonable at all. But then again, I did not look at Russia as this vicious, evil, subversive entity that had to be treated like a crocodile in the living room. So I think Trump's got more sense about all of this. The only reservation I have is who's he going to pick to do those things? Because there are a lot of people that are swimming around his administration who leave a lot to be desired on this score. And remember, some of these people have now had what would we call them? Damascus conversions. I think Rubio is a good example. Huge warmonger, pouring vile all over the Russians in the past. Waltz is another one. Okay, they've obviously had a come to Jesus moment with Trump. That's good. But if you're going to sit down with the Russians and work through the details, you better get some people in there that don't fall into that category. I think it was very wise to leave Kellogg out of the picture. I'm sorry to know that they want to involve him with the Ukrainians because he's, I think, compromised on that side. But that's a matter for the president to decide. But ultimately, the Ukrainians are going to be told to shut up and color. They lost. It's our fault as well as theirs. We share that, but it's over. And they've got to do what we tell them to do. And if they don't, they will pay a higher price.